We've all witnessed this feeling. A calm before the storm in which options are continuously being weighed and alternatives are carefully considered for an inescapable fate ahead, where we are constantly deceived by an underlying hope for more information or changed circumstances that will make decision-making easier, but then suddenly, as if a switch has been flipped, indecisive contemplation abruptly comes to a stop, and all at once, we recognize the futility of continued deliberation. A moment of clarity and a stark realization that nothing is coming to save the situation before us, so why bother continuing to think? Internal debate collapses, resulting not in distress or panic, but a calm determination to spring into action. Indeed, not when patience runs out, but when it has waited long enough. In these instances, action isn't chosen as a result of decision-making. Instead, action is what's left over when we realize all possibilities in decision-making are pointless and justifying. And so without any more hesitation, we are left to declare,
Fine. I'll do it myself.
Oh wait, that clip is misleading. It conveys this experience of rising to the occasion, like in sports or group projects in which your teammates let you down, forcing you to step up in a big way. But this experience is fundamentally different from the feeling we've described. See, Thanos picking up his gauntlet relies on the internal belief that stepping up when others have failed can still result in a successful, favorable outcome, that the group project is still savable or the soccer game is still winnable. But the feeling we've described relies on the exact opposite internal belief, the belief that the outcome is fixed no matter what course of action we take. Indeed, Thanos' declaration of self-action couldn't be more different than the declaration of self-action we're trying to articulate. For the fixed outcome we're talking about is death, or at the very least, the loss of life as we know it. And it is here where games become a special medium capable of conveying this feeling to its full capacity, more than any painting, show, or movie. Because only in games can we go from witnessing depictions of this feeling to inhabiting the feeling ourselves. See, whereas a movie or show makes you watch the inescapable fate of death, games make you walk toward it. You are the one holding W on the keyboard or up on the left stick. A clear modern example of this is in Cyberpunk 2077, as we sit upon a rooftop with the inevitability of death around the corner, carefully deliberating what to do in our final moments. The whole game has been a mission for survival thus far. All goals were oriented towards extending our life by any means possible. But alas, we've reached the tipping point, where there isn't any more room to run away from the fate of dying. So which way do we go? Who do we call? Who do we sacrifice? It's a tough moral choice, and the game knows it. That's why waiting 5 minutes without deciding reveals a secret ending.
Kinda tough deciding which of your friends get to die, isn't it? Good news is you got this one chum who's already dead. And he'd be honored to join you on a wild suicide run. You, me, and Arasaka Tower. Kinda sounds like a Eurodyne lyric, I know, but trust me, we'll go fucking Nova.
This plan, what would it entail, exactly?
Plan? Well, might be how Rogue operates. I say you grab the hottest iron you can find, stride in the tower's front door, and cut your own path down to the lower levels.
And suddenly, the hope of possible survival we've clinged onto collapses, where V accepts this terminal fate instead of trying to escape it.
If I gotta die, rather fall into my grave gun in hand and on fire, and not drag anyone down with me.
Huh. You just discovered what it takes to become a legend. Grab your iron. Let's mobilize.
And so we pull up to Arasaka's front gates without a plan or strategy, only action.
Time to party
Weapons
like it's
and other hazardous
2023.
materials are not allowed.
And if there's anything such as a secondhand adrenaline rush, this would certainly be it. This isn't a last stand, for if it were, we'd be resisting or trying to defy death. But V has made it explicitly clear that death's the only thing guaranteed. While V is given the luxury of contemplation, someone like John Marston isn't. John has spent the entire game doing the bidding of Agent Edgar Ross, someone who promised John freedom for him and his family on the agreement that he hunt down his former gang members. But at the end of the game, as John rests on his ranch chatting with his son after successfully holding up his end of the agreement, a moment of seeming relief suddenly transforms into armed conflict. Law enforcement attacks the ranch with the sole intent of eliminating John himself, and he quickly realizes the agreement between him and Agent Edgar Ross has ended in betrayal. But this isn't John's moment of clarity, like V on the rooftop. Not yet. See, in this initial instance, his actions still serve a purpose. Violence is a means to protect or buy time for him and his family. The outcome isn't fixed, and there's still a sliver of hope in fighting back. It's not until fighting culminates in a brief pause at the barn where John finally gets his moment of realization. Unlike V on the rooftop, there is no room for deliberation. He isn't given a chance to weigh options or consider alternatives, because there are none. Here, John knows that no matter what he does, escape or not, death will be right around the corner, chasing him and by extension his family, forever. And so he gives a white lie to Jack and Abigail, providing them moral justification to escape, and prepares to meet his fate directly. For death isn't negotiable anymore, it's guaranteed. John peers through the barn door to assure himself that this is truly it, takes a deep breath, and shrugs off any remaining fragments of hesitation. If John's actions have let us know anything, it's that this feeling we've been describing can emerge even when agency is withheld from us. In other words, John's moment of clarity was imposed externally through the collapse of every remaining alternative, unlike V, whose moment of clarity arrives solely from inward recognition. If you've played Red Dead Redemption 2, you'll soon start to realize that John didn't invent his ending, he learned it from someone else. Arthur's clarity, unlike V or John, is not contained to a single identifiable moment. Instead, it's a gradual realization that spans multiple chapters. See, before Arthur is diagnosed with tuberculosis, he is morally disinterested. Loyalty took precedent over right and wrong, not because Arthur had no conception of it, but because there was no need to question the difference. It's not until the diagnosis that Arthur begins to feel morally responsible for his actions, because now, for the first time, the end is perceptibly fixed, identifiable, and near. You might initially spot a parallel with V here, that death has ultimately been identified early on. But unlike V, Arthur's character arc is not purely survival-oriented. In fact, it's the opposite. Instead of fighting to extend life by any means possible, Arthur accepts his fate much earlier on, progressively transforming his moral character accordingly. Loyalty alone slowly becomes insufficient as a rationale for action. Arthur no longer questions what's good for the gang, but what's good for people, as individuals. And suddenly, the redemption in Red Dead Redemption begins to bear weight. Arthur's gradual change of character eventually culminates not into an abrupt moment of clarity like in the case of John and V, but a stable disposition, a way of being that is steadfast and firm. When the end finally arrives, there's no more room for deliberation, not because outside circumstances didn't allow for it like in John's situation, but because Arthur himself has transformed into someone who has realized its futility. The final choice, whether to save the money or help John escape, isn't a decision on Arthur's part, but a question to the player. One that asks if you are willing to let Arthur carry forth with his transformation. There isn't an objective right answer. Choosing to save the money indicates Arthur's difficulty in accepting an already decided future. For saving the money presupposes that there is still a potential future ahead of him where money will be useful. The decision is contrary to Arthur's progressive redemption, but we can't say it's morally incorrect, for it only goes to show how difficult it is to fully relinquish desire for survival. The latter decision, however, completes Arthur's character arc.
I'm coming with you.
With no regard for his own survival, Arthur fights solely to help John escape. Not because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the only thing left to do.
Arthur, go to your family. Arthur, get the hell out of here and be a goddamn man. You're my brother. I know.
Although death underlies each of the paradigm cases we've examined thus far, this feeling we've been describing doesn't seem to be overwhelmingly melancholic. Yes, absolutely, the death of Arthur and John are tragically sad in their own right, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't shed a tear during my first playthrough. V as well, I believe, is an underappreciated depressing case of loss of life as once known. But we aren't talking about the moment of death. We are talking about an experience that occurs once the conception of guaranteed death is fully accepted. An experience that seemingly resonates in some regard, for why else would you have clicked on this video? But why? Why is this feeling appealing? You might think it's because these characters' actions are morally rational to us, that they acted out of sacrifice in their final moments to deliver justice or help loved ones escape. But this notion fundamentally conflicts with the feeling we've described. See, moral sacrifice relies on the fact that alternatives are still available. It presupposes that V, John, and Arthur could have chosen otherwise in a way that meaningfully changed what was coming. But wait, I started this video off describing moments of contemplation and deliberation. Don't those inherently require choices? Yes, but having choices does not mean the future is still negotiable. See, V can choose which way to end things, John can choose to keep running away, and Arthur can choose to go back for the money. But none of these choices change the future in a meaningful way. Imagine you were just told that you had 2 hours to live. You can twiddle your fingers and walk around a bit. It seems as though you have some semblance of choice in practice, but in reality, your choices are purely cosmetic, for they all lead to the same outcome. It's like dressing up when nobody will see you, or continuing to run a race despite knowing you'll be last. What remains then isn't decision-making in the sense usually thought, but alignment. Acting in a way that accepts the outcome can't be changed. And that is why this feeling resonates. Because when we finally acknowledge that the future is closed, the actions we take stop being a means to reach a specific outcome and solely become a statement of who we are.